The Empire is a disease that thrives in darkness. It is never more alive than when we sleep. It's easy for the dead to tell you to fight. And maybe it's true. Maybe fighting's useless. Perhaps it's too late. But I'll tell you this. If I could do it again, I'd wake up early and be fighting these bastards from the start. Fight the Empire!
Tony Gilroy, welcome to Bullseye. Thank you for coming in. And I love Andor so much. I'm so glad to get to talk to you about it.
Well, thanks for having me.
When you started working on Star Wars, working on Rogue One, was that something where it was one of the billion show business screenwriting jobs you had had? Like, was it something where somebody said, get Tony Gilroy to come in here and he can come up with some stuff?
Yeah, it was a doctoring job. It was a clinical job. I mean, Kathy, I've known Kathy for years. From she and Frank Marshall have been. I mean, Frank was on Bourne Identity, and our relationship goes back even deeper than that. I actually went on it early. The summer before, she had called me up and asked me to read it, and I had a lot of things to say about it. My father was dying at that point in time. I basically said, Kathy, I only have 3 weeks. I can only work on this for 3 weeks because it looks like it's going to be the end. And I did work on it for 3 weeks, and then Scott Burns came in after me and feathered in, and then I forgot about it. And then the following year, they came back with the movie, and it needed an overhaul, and so we went to work. That's about as much about that as I like to say. I don't really like to get into details on that, but that was a clinical job, mercenary. To start, it became a really into what we did, and my brother came on. It was a big commitment, but it was a very different experience than Andor.
You've worked on all kinds of different movies in your career, especially, in those sorts of clinical jobs,
right,
as well as in the stuff that, has your name at the top.
It's the really great, it's one of the great perks of, weekly work is a really great side hustle.
What did you learn that first time around about working on something like Star Wars, something that is so huge and also has such a, set of associations and things that travel alongside it? You know what I mean?
It's kind of the reverse. My superpower was not knowing that much. My superpower was not caring very much or being respectful. I think a lot of people get involved in Star Wars and they change their game. It's so heady and it means so much to them. I had the lack of respect that you need if you're a doctor. You don't really want your surgeon to come in and do anything other than do what needs to be done. So that was at least the climb in on that was very mercenary, completely different than my experience on Andor. What did I learn? I spent a long time on Rogue. I learned a lot about Star Wars. I learned a lot about, it's kind of like you really have to think of it like the Vatican, really. There's a curia and there's people that manage the rules of it. And the rules used to be a lot more restrictive then. So I learned all about that. I learned about and then in the follow-on, in the release and whatever, I learned a lot about the Star Wars community. And yeah, it was a baptismal experience, but I thought it would be a one-off. I didn't think it was going to be a continuing part of my life at that point.
So why wasn't it? Why did it become a continuing part of your life?
A couple things. I had a couple movies shot down from after that. I wasted some time on some really important things that got shot out from under me, some movies I wanted to make. And, it was a really heady moment after you win something as big as Rogue, they were very excited about what they could do with the franchise, and lots of ideas popping around. But the economics hadn't worked themselves out yet. There was no huge scale streaming going on that would, Disney didn't have a streaming, and anybody who spent any time in Star Wars at all, you cannot do it on the cheap.
Right. Like you could, there was no version, there was no Hercules, the Legendary Journeys of Star Wars.
It's just, it's like Bond. There's no skinny version of it. And so all the ideas always seemed sort of wonky for the first couple of years. Then Kathy sent me they wanted to do a story. They wanted to do a prequel for Cassian Andor, and they wanted to do the 5 years that led into Rogue. They had that idea. That was theirs. And she sent me just as a, take a look at this, and as a friend in court, just, read this. And they had done a really cool, very slick, very smart version of the show with a crippling flaw in it. It was just, the crippling flaw was, it was Cassian and K2, the droid, going on missions, and I basically said, man, this is really, the people put this together, it's really slick, but you're going to run out of road really fast. There's no story nutrients here to keep going. They moved off that, and then they did another version, much more complicated version, but still with the same basic premise. They were just fixated on K2. They were fixated on that relationship, and a variation on what had happened before. In the middle of that, I had written sort of a manifesto in some sort of manic downtime, not to try to get a job or anything, but just to Kathy as a friend, said, look, man, if you're going to make a show about this is why you can't make it him and K2. And here's what you have to do. And if you're going to make a show, take those 5 years and put him in as big a hole as you possibly can in the beginning, and, take a roach and watch him become a butterfly. That should be your show, and a couple other ideas, but that was the central piece of it. And
because like Adventure Show is not a crazy idea that they were pitching you, right? Like,
no, it makes sense.
People
in a conference room,
Kung Fu, and Xena. And it's you can visit a different planet it works for Star Trek. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but you're doing the same thing every week. And I had the experience on Rogue, which I reminded them. And if you go back and watch Rogue with this filter, there are, I don't know, I can't remember now, but there are 3 or 4 places in the film where we're very, trying to hide it, but like, I'll stay in the truck while you go do this, or I'll be back here. Like, he doesn't, K2 just like was a real story killer. You couldn't take him anywhere. You can't do anything with him. He's so, you can't disguise him. You can't put him in a hat. He can't do anything but be what he is. And it's.
And anytime he's on screen, you have to spend a squajillion dollars having him on screen as well.
I don't know whether but it's, that wasn't my concern. Was like, I could just see how limiting the story possibilities.
There's no trench coat big enough.
No. So they came back and said, well, 2 things. One, we have streaming now, and we want to build aircraft carriers. We want to build cathedrals. We want to go big. And we read that thing that you sent us last year, and like, we want to do that now. So that's how I began to tiptoe back into it. Didn't jump in right away, and they didn't jump in right away. It was a process, but that's where it started.
What are the most exciting parts of working on something this huge and this genreic? I mean, the genre here is Star Wars,
right?
Relative to working on a political intrigue thriller that is set in Washington, D.C. in 2025 or something. Like, what's cool about it?
I mean, honestly, what was interesting was the idea that I knew Diego really well from Rogue, and
Diego Luna, who's the star of the show.
Yeah, he plays Cassian Andor, and he is just not just an incredibly impressive actor, it's just a really great human. and a great partner and a really smart producer. And so I was like, wow, he's a really cool person to be in business with. Check that off the list. They're basically saying to me, we want to give you an epic canvas, a gigantic canvas with really big resources and a really skilled, even base of, pine wood and Star Wars technicians and all that stuff. And we want you to do a piece about revolution and insurrection and authoritarian power. And my 5-year tranche that I have of the calendar is just the most kinetic, exciting piece of the puzzle, really. And I had spent my whole life, I had no proper education, but I'm really, the result is I'm very autodidactic. I've learned everything I needed to learn. I taught myself, and I am a pretty curious person. I've been reading all kinds of history for decades and really fascinated with revolutions, and the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, and Zapata and Oliver Cromwell. And, I just, for whatever reason, I just was loading up on that my whole life and revisiting things. New books would come out, I go back and deep dive on something else. All this cool that I was never going to have a chance to use, and they're giving me this massive thing and saying, we want to do that. And we want to show about ordinary people, when history comes and knocks at the door. And then there's a testing process, a feel out process, do they really mean it? And so I do a lot of work for free. I know the Guild doesn't like that, whatever, but it's work for me. I like to do a lot of, if I'm working for you, I want to show you a lot before I decide to get married, because I don't want to I want to wake up and find out we don't want the same things. And so, all right, what if I want to do an opening scene where he goes to a brothel and kills 2 cops who roust him. Okay. And then we want to hire the production designer from Chernobyl. It looks like he's 14. He's young Mozart production designer. We want that guy. And they're like, okay. And so I'm testing them, they're testing me, and finally we're starting. It was just too cool an opportunity to pass by.
I mean, I imagine they were basically like, they can't swear and you can't show any guts coming out of anybody, but like, besides that, we hired you for a reason?
Well, I mean, my game is not secret. I haven't really changed the way I work for a long time. I kind of have my thing. So they're hiring me. They know it's going to be a behavior show. It's going to be a character show. They know what I'm going to do. The restrictions, I thought the restrictions would be more limiting when I started than when we finished it. We can't, there's a limit to where we can go sexually, obviously. But in terms of violence and in terms of graphic pain and emotional pain and we can, I haven't felt really limited over the past 5 years in a way that I might have anticipated.
I rewatched Michael Clayton recently, the film that you wrote and directed. I loved it every bit as much as I loved it when I saw it, in a movie theater when it came out. One of the things that I hadn't thought about much since I saw it back then was the extent to which it, defined and redefined George Clooney on screen and like what he could be on screen. That, he had been great on ER and people had been trying to figure out how to make him a movie star who was so gorgeous and talented. And I think Michael Clayton really nailed perfectly what was special about him as a on-screen presence. What was special about Diego Luna that you learned from making Rogue One or that you were thinking about when you were making Andor?
he has an instantly palpable, soulful atmosphere to him. He's classic. You could see him working in any era of filmmaking. I like that a lot. He's one of those actors who can just turn everything his way, any line, his fluidity. And there is something, I knew there was something inherently messianic about what we were doing. There is some sort of spiritual dynamic to him that some actors have and some don't. Sometimes you don't want that at all. You want somebody who isn't vibrating in a certain way. You want somebody who's sort of just right there, and he's not that. It's ephemeral, but I just, and in Rogue, by luck of the draw, you don't know very much about him. It's very enigmatic, but the few things that are really articulated were really helpful for what we were doing here. So we weren't painted into a corner. Everything that was in Rogue was really helpful. I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old. And what does he say at the end? She comes out and says, "Oh, they're not going to let us make the mission." And he's with all these guys, and he says, "Man, if we've done horrible, horrible things for the rebellion, and if we don't go do this, everything we'll have done will be wrong. We have to go off and sacrifice to do this." And that's a pretty good place to jumping off point. It's a long answer to a short question.
I mean, there's something about looking at him. I was trying to think about it as I was watching the show today, and he's really beautiful in such a human way.
Like, not pretty though. He has that movie star. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Like Timothée Chalamet is gorgeous, incredible to look at. I've loved him in everything I've ever seen him in. Right. I believe him as a human being in everything I've seen him in because he's such a vibrant actor. Right. But he also seems like an amazing space being in a way when I look at him on screen, right? I'm like, wow, get a look at this,
Right.
Diego Luna has all of that sort of beautiful charisma. Like, I want to look at him, but he also seems like a guy that could be standing next to me, which is a very rare thing to have both of those.
Yeah, and mileage. You really feel there's mileage there. Like he's used himself. I don't know. It's, you know it when you see it. And man, he just does it every day. It's been a bouquet with him all the way through.
I know you had done a little bit of TV work, but you work very substantially on movies. So what did you have to adjust in thinking about writing 10 or 12 hours of something with other people rather than writing 90 minutes or 120 minutes by yourself?
Oh man, it's absolutely liberating in the most amazing way. I mean, my feeling is that I've been a short story writer for the bulk of my career, and I'm a novelist now. This is really, I think there's a risk to it. We talk about this in my cohort of the older screenwriters that, what would happen if you didn't grow up with the restrictions and all the limitations that we had to go through and all the things we had to learn to keep everything tight and, the sort of ghetto of 125 pages and all that really bound up. Because, I mean, that's a thing. I mean, that's a constant thing. What's going to happen when people are only doing long form and they don't have to worry about the clock and they don't have to worry about the time? But oh my God, it's as if there's a new dial on a console of your imagination where time is just a plug-in. And like, oh my God, I loved not looking at that number on the top right-hand side. I love the fact that the episodes could be any length that we really needed them to be. We never worried about, oh, it's 39, it's 52. Some of them, it's shocking. Sometimes I don't even know how long they are. And the idea that oh my God, 12 hours to take care of a year. I mean, I felt free. I've felt free all the way through the whole thing. To let scenes go on a little bit longer than not button everything up. And I mean, all the things that you were, I came up in the 80s, all the things you were, not trained to do. You're trying to feed your family. These are the things you learned how to do,
Yeah, I mean, and a big part of your job, not just in writing things that had your name on them, but things that didn't have your name on them, was figuring out what gears had to be moved or replaced in order to not lose the audience's attention for a moment at any point.
Always. That's still the job. I mean, that's job one, to hang on to your attention. That is my number one, no matter long form, short form, no matter what I'm doing. In this interview, I'm trying to keep you hanging on. I mean, I want you to know what happens next. It removes an anxiety that's always been there for every screenwriter. And I found it incredibly freeing.
I mean, I'll tell you that when I was watching the first season of the show, I was sitting there the first 2 episodes thinking like, oh man, I get to watch a character-driven Star Wars TV show. I love this. I was like, oh, I get to watch a heisty Star Wars TV show. Oh, this is like my dream. This is the greatest. And then I was like, wait, it's a whole additional thing?
I know, man. We just keep going. No, I know. It's
And I mean, this season, you're looking at a bigger chunk of time, and you've essentially made four serial films, like 3-4 hour films in a row. Like, it's a whole nother project.
It's how we think of it. We think we've made, 8 films in 5 years. That's how we really do think of it. But yeah, man, the big canvas, the time, the resources to do it. I mean, 400 speaking parts over the 2 seasons. 400. I mean, it's some of it's silly, but it's been a great place to hide out for the last 6 years. It really has been for me.
Andor is incredibly aesthetically intense, even for a Star Wars thing. Like, Star Wars in and of itself is a very aesthetic experience, right. Visual experience. And Andor is very particularly so. So other than just, knowing that you can always look at a coffee table book of concept art from The Empire Strikes Back that's sitting around the office, how do you decide what you want things to look like when you get a Star Wars thing?
My number one primary creative collaborator on the show is the production designer, Luke Hull. All of the preliminary conversations that I have for everything are with Luke. What was terrifying in the beginning became just a joy as we went on. But the terrifying thing that you realize in the beginning is that absolutely every single thing we do has to be designed. You can't say radio interview, you got to design it. You say everything, Tony, library, street.
Tony, I have a friend who is a professional theme park writer. So he writes the storylines that you experience.
What a cool job, right? Okay.
Yeah, when you're in line at Disneyland or whatever,
yeah.
Right? Or at like a Snoopy theme park in Dubai.
Yeah.
These are consultancies. And when the Disneyland Star Wars world opened up 5 years ago or whatever that was, the most exciting achievement of his long career was a photograph that he posted. I designed this cocktail cup for Star Wars Land.
I know, man.
And it's like, yeah, you're going to have a Star Wars thing. They're going to drink cocktails. If they're going to drink cocktails, they have to have a space cup.
Okay, so just, I mean, by a factor of 1 billion. We can't do anything, I mean, without designing it. And so Luke and I, it was daunting in the beginning. It was really just shocking. The naivete that we went into the show with and the ignorance that started it was, I mean, without COVID, it would have been a huge public Hollywood failure, because we really didn't know what I was getting into. Diego, we really didn't know what we were getting into, the scale of it. But then, once we had a system and once we settled into it, and once we got a rhythm to it, I lived a maximal imaginative experience, literally, no exaggeration, every single day for 5 years. I mean, there isn't any part of my imagination that wasn't valuable, useful, in play all day long, every day, meeting after meeting, thing after thing. Everything has to be designed and chosen. And it's not just the casting. It's not just the color of the hair. It's not just the sash on his robe. It's not just the weapon. It's not just the scene. It's all of it. And it became a real joy to do that. And all the world building and anthropology that we did, all the worlds that we created, languages and cultures and customs. And I mean, what a gas, man. I mean, just really turned into, it really turned into a lot of fun. A great place to hide out. A great drug.
When actors sign up for network TV shows, something that I often hear from them when they come in here is the extent to which they had not grappled with the fact that they had signed up for potentially one job for the next 10 years of their life.
I know.
You obviously have now been working on Andor for what,
almost 6 years. Yeah.
And you will have made 2 seasons of the show, and that's going to be the end. Had you come to terms with the idea that you were signing up for such a big chunk of your life being dedicated to this?
The agreement that we made in the beginning, the silly, naive thing, we said, we'll do 5 seasons. We'll take 1 season will be each year that gets him closer. And without ever really considering any of the things that we've just been discussing. As we got rolling, as we started shooting, and I got out of quarantine and I could get over there, and we had our system down of how we're going to make the show, I went up to Scotland, and Diego and I literally sat down in the backyard of this little hotel in Pitlochry and had a scotch, and we just were like, what are we going to do? There's no way in hell we're ever going to be able to make 5 seasons of this show. He'll be 60. I'll be in an assisted living home by then. It's ridiculous. What are we going to do? And I was trying to, and there was this incredibly elegant answer sitting right in front of us. It's like, wow, you know what? We need 4 years, and we have 4 blocks of 3 episodes. That's how our show has always been organized from a production point of view. The directors come in and do blocks of 3. We're like, wow, 4 blocks of 3, 4 years. What if we did a year every block? And I think I went upstairs to the hotel room and started sketching. What would that be like? And God, there's all this negative space. And wow, what if we came back, and when we came back, what if we came back on a Monday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday? What if we came back for 3 days each time, or something really intense? What would that do? Wow, there's going to be all kinds of problems with that. The more I played with it, the more elegant and energizing it grew. I was like, all right, let me write the top and let me write the first and last scene of each block just as proof of concept. So we don't want to have all this exposition, Chekhovian kind of, since last I saw you and all that. I would love to be able to take credit for it as this is what I would thought of, but it really came about from an epic problem that we had. And once it got on the table and once we started to figure out, it was just so exciting and so energizing, and it had all these knock-on effects to help us out. That was our big solve. That was our really big breakthrough. And the reason that if the show really works and the show is really good, the real reason that that's possible is because we knew our ending so clear. Our last scene of what we were going to do was so evident. I can't stress how, for anybody who's working on anything, I mean, problem solving, limitations, not enough tools in the toolbox. The restrictions are your friend. I mean, it's almost always incredibly liberating to work your way around these things. You almost always come up with a better solution. And problem solving has been COVID, strikes, this issue, money issues later on. They've all led to, they've all forced inspired problem solves.
Your brother, Dan Gilroy, is a writer and director as well.
Mm-hmm.
Your brother, John, is an editor.
Mm-hmm.
Your father was a playwright and screenwriter who, among other things, won a Pulitzer and a Best Play Tony when you were a little kid. Did having a parent who was a writer make writing as a life and career more or less appealing for you?
Wow. It made it understandable. It's not anything that this wasn't what wasn't what any of us started off doing. And my father moved us away from Hollywood into upstate New York because he didn't want any of us to go into the business.
And I
was a musician at that point.
Yeah, you quit college to go into music.
Yeah, and Danny and Johnny both, I don't think any of us really initially, we didn't grow up saying, oh, we're going to do this. I think that, people talk about the Nepo, when it comes to writing, no one's going to make your movie because you know somebody or because you have a connection. And I really do believe that a great script is a great script, and people want great scripts, so an undeniably great script will get found. I think that where the real advantage is, people don't really pay attention to. I think that the real Nepo uplift, the step up, is the fact that we learn what a writer's life looks like, the tempo of it, the financial, triumph and failure of it. And one day you're everything's wonderful. The next day you're trashed. It's just, we learned what that made sense to us. A writer's life made sense to me when I came to it. I understood that. I think that's the really big advantage. How to live was not something that I had to worry. That you can't learn how to write at the kitchen table. Your father's like, I grew up in a great house with a lot of books, great library, kind of a terrible education we all had. It was kind of a weird place to grow up. It wasn't, I went to college for 15 minutes but what the life looks like, how it feels, and it made sense to me. I think that's the real fundamental advantage.
Did it feel stable to you when you were young?
No. I think the term of art in our house was luxurious insecurity. No, my father was, he was essentially a real gambler, and a real gambler, and then he gambled on his career. He really needed risk and really needed to, he needed to constantly, he needed to risk everything all the time.
In what way?
Independent films, independent attitudes, mortgaged the house to make a movie, huge successes, big, we're rolling in it and we're living large. And he used to come out to Beverly Hills Hotel with, and he'd check in and he wouldn't have the money to pay for the hotel, and the concierge was a pal of his, and he'd get it, he'd have to stay out until he got a job to cover, come back, hit it big, knock it out. And it's a roller coaster, a real roller coaster.
How do you think that affected you as an adult?
It made me very conservative and risk averse. I think my career has been very risk averse. I think I didn't direct until I was 50. I think I've had a very conservative career in that sense. I think I've only become more free as time has gone on.
I can understand why being a craftsperson with a skill set would be appealing.
Yeah, very much so. I did it with my when I was playing music. I think the same sort of thing. I had an artificial attraction and idea that I wanted to be like a real to be, I'm not going to direct. I'm not going to make films. I want to be the guy you call. I want to be a screenwriter. I want to be that thing, and I'll nail that down, and I'll save my money, and I'll live that life. And as I went along, I realized how inhibiting that was, and you're selling yourself short. And I got looser as I got older in every way. I'm much freer than than I certainly was when I started, for sure.
You had an attempt at a music career first, then a fiction writing career, that is to say, like an on-the-page fiction writing
trying
career.
To be a short story, trying to be Raymond Carver, like everybody else.
Yeah, and you backed into writing for the screen, sort of.
Kind of.
When you did that, did it feel like a backup option?
I was a very, very, very good musician, and I thought I was going to be a studio player until I came to LA and saw real studio players. But I wasn't natural. I didn't have that. I didn't have what I wanted. I didn't have that, like, drop dead. And when you're around those people, and the more of them you meet, you kind of go, wow, I'm good and interesting, but I'm not that. And if you're lucky as a human, you find the thing that feels natural to you. When I finally went to writing screenplays, scenes and being a dramatist, I was like, I felt at home. I felt like all the weird things I'd ever done in my life, and all the weird jobs I'd ever had, and all the crap I'd done that was so weird, like, all made sense. And I felt like, wow, this is something that I see better than everybody else sees. I felt like I always wanted to feel as a musician in a way, and couldn't, and felt outside of. And I felt like I was home. It took a long time to get good at it and really hone that, but I kind of knew I was in the place I should be.
William Goldman was a family friend of yours.
He was, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
How did you think of him? Did you know him when you were a kid?
Yeah, I met him when I was like 10, 12 years old, yeah. He was a friend of my father's, yeah.
Did you know what his deal was when you were that age?
Yeah, I mean, the astonishing thing about Bill was that, he would always come to the children's table, or he would always, seek you out, and he would just grill you about, like, what are you listening to? What are you watching? He was a pop culture sponge. He really was incredibly curious about what you were doing. And so you sort of hang out with him. And then I must have been 12 or whatever. I was a big reader, and I started reading the books, and I'm like, wow, that guy, that sounds exactly like the guy who's writing this book. Like, the idea that you could have such a short distance between your head and your hand was fascinating to me. I'm reading this guy, and that's his voice. That's him. I feel like I'm with him. And then, I mean, it's fascinating. Too long to go into, but my relationship with Bill was as a friend of my father's and as a child. And then Danny and I, when we became a writing team, we worked for and with Bill. I then became a collaborator with him in many ways. I became an advisor to him in later life. I became, when Bill died, other than my brothers, he was so weird. He was like my oldest friend. A very strange, really wonderful, complicated relationship. Yeah.
What was the complication?
No, just that of having a contemporary of your father's, and having someone who had been a mentor, and somebody who had been a peripheral figure in your life, becoming someone who could make your career happen for you and help that happen, and then someone who needed you, to have him need me. And that happened as well. Fascinating, that, unexpected.
And interesting, I imagine, to have everyone's mentor in the abstract, like the person, like, I think of him as a mentor, having never written a screenplay in my life, nor had any interest, just from reading Adventures in the Screen Trade and Which Lie Did I Tell, and watching his movies. But like, to have that be your real life mentor.
We Scott Frank and I, we arranged a large part of Bill's funeral, and we did the final 2 eulogies, and it was obviously extremely well attended. And we put together the movie clip and the whole thing, and Scott and I did it together. And Scott did a thing in his eulogy. We split up, so everybody had a different topic. And Scott did this amazing thing. He said, everybody in this room that Bill took to lunch and talked to you and helped you out, stand up in this room right now. And man, and the number of people that were there and who they were, some of them, I mean, what a murderer's row of, I mean, yeah, man. I mean, no, but I had I had an inside track on that. Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like when Stephen Sondheim died, like Stephen Sondheim, the greatest songwriter of the, there's an argument to be made.
One of Bill's best friends.
Yeah. There's an argument to be made, greatest songwriter of the 20th century, right? And like when he died, there was a lot of talk about how great West Side Story is and how great Company is, and they are, but also just everyone being like, oh yeah, he replied to my letter too.
I know, man. You got to give back. The giving back but it wasn't like anything fabricated. It was legitimate interest. And Bill kept himself young and kept himself plugged in and kept himself alive. But that same curiosity that used to come and bug us was the same thing that carried on for a very long time. And the only time, it's a lesson to all of us, the people that know him, when that started to run out of gas is when everything started to run out of gas. And you really got to keep that alive. You got to keep it alive. Your curiosity has to stay just vibrant all the time.
Now that you have made this show that involved millions upon millions of dollars and an infinite number of production design decisions and the creation of multiple cultures and languages and so on and so forth, all these things, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that when you are done talking to people like me, your desire will be to get your hands on something that big and exciting again? Or do you think it will be to sit down and write something about a compelling person to look at who drives around in a black car and visits four specific boardrooms?
No, I already did it. I wrote another film over the summer, last spring and summer, very, very, very different, all about movie music and movie scoring, and about a cellist who comes back to Hollywood to do session work. And no, I got the monkey off my back right away. I don't want to. I couldn't take the heat of this. You're also vulnerable on a show like this. You can't get sick. You can't stumble. It's like a wave. It's like surfing one of those huge waves. You get underneath it, you start spinning. If it fell away from you, you'd really, really drown. I was very fortunate to just sort of stay able and whatever. And that kind of pressure, I'm not sure I would want to take on something that substantial. And I yearn to direct again. I'll be well sad as long as I'm making something. Making the process, finishing, working with other people. I'm easily satisfied that way, I think.
Well, Tony, I'm really grateful for your time, and I'm especially grateful for your work because I just really adore Andor, and I love so much of your other work.
Can I say one last thing to your audience? Because we're trying to get the Star Wars adverse, Star Wars resistant audience. That's really been part of what we're doing here. And I would say you don't have to know anything about Star Wars at all to watch this show.
Tony, let me say this. I'm on record. I'm very well known the world around as a medium Star Wars guy. I'm a person that has watched and enjoyed the original Star Wars films as a child. I loved Rian Johnson's Star Wars movie. I liked Rogue One a lot. Andor is my joint. So if you're out there and you've been like, how come there's no like exciting genre television shows that are actually about characters and not dumb at all? Where are the Michael Clayton streaming television programs? Well, great news. The Michael Clayton guy made Andor.
Thank you.